Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States, stands out as one of the most energetic and multifaceted figures in American history. Born in 1858 and active in politics, war, conservation, and letters until his death in 1919, he reshaped the presidency and helped usher the nation into the modern era. Americans remember him as a trustbuster, a rough rider, a conservationist, and a champion of the strenuous life, a phrase he used to describe a life of effort, courage, and public service. Early life and education. Theodore Roosevelt Jr. was born on October 27, 1858, into a wealthy family in New York City. His father, Theodore Roosevelt Sr., was a successful businessman and philanthropist. His mother, Martha Mitty Bullock Roosevelt, came from a prominent Southern family in Georgia. Young T.D., as he was called, suffered from severe asthma and was physically frail, but he possessed a vivid imagination and intense curiosity. He devoured books, especially on natural history and adventure, and kept detailed notebooks, including a Roosevelt Museum of Natural History in his own room. His father encouraged him to overcome his physical weakness through exercise. Roosevelt later recalled that his father told him he had the mind but not the body, and urged him to make your body. In response, Theodore embarked on a rigorous regimen of calisthenics, boxing, and outdoor activity. This self-imposed transformation from sickly child to robust young man shaped his lifelong belief that character could be built through willpower and effort. Roosevelt attended Harvard College, where he studied widely, classics, science, history, while also fencing, rowing, and joining clubs. During his college years, he began serious historical research, producing a well-regarded study of the War of 1812. His experience at Harvard broadened his intellectual horizons and gave him confidence in his abilities as a scholar and a future public figure. Personal tragedy and turn to politics. After graduating from Harvard in 1880, Roosevelt married Alice Hathaway Lee, a Bostonian of beauty and charm. He also enrolled briefly at Columbia Law School, but found himself drawn instead to politics and writing. He entered New York State politics as a reform-minded Republican, winning a seat in the state assembly at a young age. In Albany, he quickly gained a reputation for vigor and independence, attacking corruption and party bosses. In 1884, Roosevelt suffered a devastating double tragedy. His wife Alice died shortly after giving birth to their daughter, and his mother died of illness on the same day in the same house. Overwhelmed with grief, he withdrew from public life and went west to the Dakota Territory, where he ranched, hunted, and lived among cowboys and frontiersmen. The Western experience deepened Roosevelt's love of the outdoors and his identification with the American frontier. He tested himself physically, riding, roping, enduring harsh winters, and embraced the strenuous life as a personal creed. During this period, he also wrote books about ranching and frontier life, building his reputation as an author. The West became part of his identity and later informed his conservation policies and his image as a vigorous, rough-hewn leader. Returned to New York and rise to national prominence. In the late 1880s, Roosevelt returned to New York, remarried to Edith Kermit Corral, a childhood friend, and resumed his political career. He served in various roles, including member of the U.S. Civil Service Commission, where he pressed for merit-based government appointments, president of the New York City Police Board, where he fought corruption and enforced discipline, and then Assistant Secretary of the Navy under President William McKinley. As Assistant Secretary, Roosevelt advocated modernizing the Navy and supported a more assertive American role abroad. When war with Spain loomed in 1898 over Cuba's struggle for independence, he saw it as both a moral cause and an opportunity to test American strength. He resigned his post, formed the first U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, better known as the Rough Riders, and went to fight in Cuba. Rough Rider and War Hero. In Cuba, Roosevelt and the Rough Riders participated in the campaign around Santiago, including the famed charge up Kettle Hill, often popularly conflated with nearby San Juan Hill. Roosevelt's personal bravery, riding on horseback, under fire, rallying his men, made headlines. Newspapers back home portrayed him as a quintessential American hero, fearless, patriotic, and energetic. The Spanish-American War resulted in a swift U.S. victory and expanded American influence overseas with the acquisition of territories like Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. For Roosevelt, the war confirmed his belief that martial valor and national assertiveness were key to both personal and national greatness. It also catapulted him into political stardom. Governor of New York and vice president riding on his war hero status, Roosevelt was elected governor of New York in 1898. As governor, he championed progressive reforms, regulation of corporations, labor protections, and measures against corruption. His activism annoyed conservative Republican bosses in the state who worried that his popularity and independence threatened their control. Looking for a way to sideline him, party leaders backed his nomination as vice president on the 1900 Republican ticket with William McKinley. The vice presidency was then often a politically weak position. Roosevelt campaigned energetically across the country, delivering fiery speeches for the ticket. McKinley and Roosevelt won, and Roosevelt assumed the vice presidency in March 1901. 6 months later, President McKinley was assassinated. Roosevelt, only 42 years old, suddenly became president, the youngest in U.S. history. What had been meant as a political dead end became the entry point to the nation's highest office. The presidency, square deal, and progressive reform. As president, 1901-1909, Roosevelt reshaped the office into a much more active and visible institution. He believed the president had a duty to act as a steward of the people, using executive power to serve the public interest unless explicitly forbidden by the Constitution. This activist vision expanded the scope of federal government involvement in economic and social issues. Roosevelt's domestic program, which he dubbed the Square Deals, focused on three main areas: controlling corporations, protecting consumers, and conserving natural resources. He saw immense industrial corporations, trusts, as both necessary for modern efficiency and potentially dangerous to competition and democracy if left unchecked. His administration brought antitrust suits against major companies such as the Northern Securities Railroad Combination, signaling that no corporation was above the law. He also supported legislation for consumer protection, notably following public outcry over unsanitary practices in the meatpacking industry. The Meat Inspection Act and Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 established federal standards for food and medicines, increasing government oversight in the marketplace. Roosevelt's willingness to confront corporate power made him popular among reformers and many ordinary citizens, though it also earned him enemies in some business circles. Conservation, a cause dear to Roosevelt's heart, became a defining feature of his presidency. Alarmed by the rapid exploitation of forests, minerals, and wildlife, he used executive authority to create national forests, wildlife refuges, and national parks. Working with Gifford Pinchot and other conservationists, he protected millions of acres of public land for future generations. From an American perspective, these efforts helped embed the idea that natural resources should be managed scientifically and preserved as a national inheritance. Foreign policy and the big stick. In foreign affairs, Roosevelt pursued an assertive policy often summarized by his phrase, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." He believed the United States had both the right and responsibility to project power in the Western Hemisphere and beyond. The Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine asserted that the U.S. could intervene in Latin American countries to prevent European involvement, a stance that justified various interventions and protectorates. Roosevelt was instrumental in supporting the construction of the Panama Canal, seeing it as vital to U.S. naval and commercial power. When Colombia rejected a treaty allowing canal construction, Roosevelt backed a Panamanian independence movement and quickly signed a new canal treaty with the new government. The canal, completed after his presidency, dramatically shortened sea routes between the Atlantic and Pacific and symbolized American engineering capability and strategic reach. Despite his reputation for toughness, Roosevelt also earned international recognition as a peacemaker. He mediated the end of the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, hosting negotiations in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. For his efforts, he received the Nobel Peace Prize, the first American president to do so. This combination of military preparedness and diplomatic engagement reflected his complex view of power. Force should be available and credible, but war should not be undertaken lightly. Later years, Progressive Party, and final adventures. Roosevelt chose not to seek a third consecutive term in 1908, honoring the tradition established by George Washington. He supported William Howard Taft as his successor, expecting Taft to continue his policies. However, Roosevelt grew disillusioned with what he saw as Taft's more conservative leadership and departure from progressive reforms. By 1912, the rift had deepened. Roosevelt challenged Taft for the Republican nomination and, when he failed to secure it, formed a new progressive party, often called the Bull Moose Party, after Roosevelt's quip that he felt fit as a bull moose. His 1912 campaign promoted an ambitious platform of social and political reforms: women's suffrage, social insurance, regulation of corporations, and more direct democracy. Although he lost the election to Democrat Woodrow Wilson, Roosevelt's candidacy split the Republican vote and demonstrated the strength of progressive sentiment in American politics. Even out of office, Roosevelt remained a public figure and adventurer. He embarked on an African safari under the auspices of the Smithsonian Institution, collecting specimens and writing about his experiences. Later, he led a perilous expedition to explore an uncharted tributary of the Amazon River, the River of Doubt. The trip nearly killed him. He contracted severe infections and returned to the U.S., physically weakened, but still intellectually active. Final years and legacy. In his final years, Roosevelt continued to write prolifically histories, biographies, essays, and to comment on national and international affairs. He criticized the Wilson administration's initial neutrality in World War I, urging readiness and arguing that the U.S. should stand firmly against German militarism. 4 of his sons served in the war. One, Quentin, was killed in combat, a loss that deeply affected him. Theodore Roosevelt died on January 6, 1919, at his home in Oyster Bay, New York, at the age of 60. His death prompted widespread mourning and tributes from across the political spectrum and around the world. Many Americans felt that an era of bold, vigorous leadership had ended. Roosevelt's legacy is multidimensional. As a president, he helped redefine the office as an active national leadership role, not a passive executor of congressional will. His trust-busting and regulatory policies laid foundations for modern economic governance. His conservation efforts preserved vast landscapes and resources that remain central to America's natural heritage. His foreign policy strengthened U.S. global influence, though it also entrenched patterns of intervention, especially in Latin America, that later generations would question. Culturally, Roosevelt embodied a particular vision of American manhood and citizenship: energetic, self-reliant, willing to fight, yet also engaged in reading, writing, and public service. His enthusiasm, moral certainty, and forceful personality inspired admirers and critics alike. For many Americans, he remains a symbol of national confidence and reformist zeal at the dawn of the 20th century, a reminder of both the possibilities and complexities of using power at home and abroad to pursue what one believes to be the public good. Do not use any music for this video.